Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now.
Brian, I wanted to rewind a little bit, man, because I think you're coming up on like 8 years in the UFC. 8 years, man. That's a long time. But I want to into before you got signed,
Yeah,
right? You just had won the combat, or I don't know if you won, but you just won the fight for the title for Ring of Combat against Julio Arce, and then there was like that period where you weren't fighting, but you were supposed to fight for ACB, and then those fights they continued got canceled, and then you got signed by the UFC, and then you went to Brazil and fought the number 13 guy. Just take us through that little sequence, that little history right there.
yeah, it was kind of crazy, man. I was like, it was like a while before the UFC signed me. I think it was a year at least before it actually happened from when I won that title from Ring of Combat, and I fought Julio Arce. Actually, I fought him twice. So I fought him once. I won the title, and then I went on to fight Josh Robinson on the Dana White looking for a fight. I spinning back fist knockout that guy, and I thought for sure like they're gonna sign me now. And then what happened was nothing happened. I didn't get signed on that show, which shocked me. And then they wanted me to fight Julio again, and I was like, man, this is risky. Like Julio's a tough guy. I gotta fight him again and defend a close fight. So then I fought Julio again, and I guillotined him, and I won by a guillotine choke. And I thought, okay, I'm definitely getting signed now. And even then, after that, I was on like a 5 or 6 fight win streak. I had a fight canceled with ACB. I was supposed to. It was like 4 months later, I got the call for the UFC. It was like 2 weeks' notice. I had to go to Brazil and fight Yuri Alcantara, but it was like such a big opportunity, and to make my debut against a top guy. It was a crazy story how it all unfolded.
It was, man, and I remember winning in the first round, and then Brian Stan, not even Joe Rogan, Brian Stan interviewed you. Shout out to Brian Stan, and that crowd going nuts. Like, how did that feel, man? Now that you look back at it, years later.
Yeah, I remember that moment. It was cool. Like Brian Stan came in, he interviewed me, and I knew all about Brazil, like the hostile crowd and all that. As much as possible. Like this is my introduction to the UFC, so like a little bit and have fun with that post fight speech and try to call my shots and make something happen. So I was having fun with it. I started doing the chant back at the crowd that they always do, and I think like they didn't like that, so they started yelling back at me, and it got louder and louder in there, and it was wild. I remember like the security escorted me out, and they were like covering me, and I didn't think it was that bad. My way out the tunnel, and they were like, "Yeah, you should probably stay in your hotel when you get back and not leave." And I was like,
Yeah, man, that's hilarious, man. Hilarious. Yeah, man, it's a trip. Like, you started off fighting ranked guys, man. Like, next fight you fought Marlon Vera, like almost instantly, right? It was just pretty insane how you started your career and what you've been through the past couple of years. Now you come back, after that neck injury, and you face off against Cody Garbrandt, man. There was a lot of stuff going on ahead of that fight, man. And, I think just making it to the cage was a victory in itself. Do you feel that way?
"Yeah, you know what? It was tough because it was like the unexpected with the neck surgery and everything, and I had kind of get in the rhythm of being confident about using my neck and certain positions and getting choked again and wrestling as hard as I can again. So like it took time to get used to that, and I think even maybe going into that fight, like I wasn't quite there yet, but I wasn't going to turn down an opportunity with my training camp, and I went in there healthy and honestly with 100% belief in myself. And the crazy thing about this game is like you can go in there and feel like everything is aligned. Like I just felt like this was like destiny. Like after the whole neck procedure and like coming back and being given really a race my whole past losses, whatever happened before the neck thing. Like this was a chance to really like catapult myself back into the top of the division and like to come up short was like really heartbreaking, even though I felt amazing in there. I was landing good calf kicks, and my game plan was working well. I just got caught in there. Guy had fast hands, heavy hands, and he hurt me a little bit early on. Then he kind of caught me like shortly after with another right hand. So it just sucks to have to, but I guess everything happens for a reason, and we get another chance against another Cody. So hopefully we get this Cody right.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, that fight happened in December. So how were you feeling, like physically and mentally, after the fight?
Feeling fine physically, like nothing really was bothering me much. Even the neck, like the neck was fine after the fight. It wasn't like, anything happened with my neck in there. I did take some hard shots, but like I was fine taking shots. I was sparring hard in the gym. I just kind of was, I guess, training a little bit smarter to kind of understand where you're at. You can't, go as hard as you might have went in the past when you were in your 20s. So, just making, I felt present, I felt there, and like I felt 100% all in. And that's what breaks my heart the most is like I was saying before, is like you could be completely, everything feels right. The walkout, the warm up, my spirit was, really strong. And then you come up short, and it's like, it almost is like how, and that's the hard part. But, it's the fight game too, everybody, it's just one of those things that we got to deal with. But the only thing that really fixes it is a win, so that's what I'm looking for here.
All right, Cody Gibson, man, another gritty veteran, been through it all, just like yourself. What do you think of him and the fighting style?
Yeah, I think this matchup is a little bit more of what would have been as a more of a fair, matchup. Although the opportunity was amazing. So we're at in our careers, I feel like this is a good, test to see, like, who still belongs. I know he's been in and out of the UFC. He was in, he looked good in that fight, and he was back on the Ultimate Fighter and did really well on there, and got to the finale and came up short. And here he is, coming off a couple losses himself, and I know both of us have our backs against the wall essentially, so that makes for a fun. So I'm expecting like the best Cody Gibson that I've seen, and I think stylistically I match up well with him. I know he has like a good wrestling background; those are his roots. But he's also a long, big frame guy for the weight class. So he uses his striking well with that, and it's just like I got to use my leverage in there, my power, and really put pressure on him. I think he doesn't really like when.
Were you surprised that they didn't line you up against like a prospect or something like that? Because that's what they've been usually doing, right? You don't really see too many of these like vet versus vet fights.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised because I think that, like, they understand where both of us are at right now. It kind of makes a sense with, both of us coming off a couple of losses, and then like his age, my age, we both are experienced guys. We're both veterans, and I think, what I mean? Like who's gonna, prevail and stick with us here between these guys. So I think they're kind of looking at what their intentions are. But I think this fight is like a fair, fair matchup.
Yeah, every fight has a storyline, right? And I guess this fight, the storyline is vet versus vet. Everybody, you guys have your back against the wall. It's something that they can say ahead of the fight that they can promote.
Yeah, exactly. And he's been in and out of the UFC, and he has his story with the Ultimate Fighter and everything. And I've had a long career with the UFC and my ups and downs and stuff. And I think still just coming off of that surgery and coming back and still being here, I think, like you said, is a win in itself. And I think there's a story there too. And I think my story is still there's still more to tell. And I think that this fight is going to be an example of like where I'm at now, coming off of that loss, and like where my neck is now compared to where it was.
And from the experience of the camp with the comeback and everything, and now you have another camp. Like, what did you learn from that last camp that you've kind of altered in this camp coming up, or the camp that you're in right now? Sorry.
take from it because of like how good I felt, going in there, and how I felt in the gym, honestly. Like I was working really hard. Like we were pushing, we were doing like our sparring rounds, and then essentially running a full practice after sparring, like pushing ourselves conditioning wise. Like I really haven't worked out hard in a long time. So I really went in there like prepared, like feeling like, man, I really left it all like in the gym leading up to this fight. Like I gave everything, I obviously like worked around my neck as best I could, but as far as pushing myself and preparing, like I was in great shape going into that fight, like really good, shape, and really good mental strength, like belief in myself that I was going to get it done. So it's hard to kind of accept, but like from that, I feel like kind of just keep that same mentality, just build off of like my confidence about, my grappling and using my neck more and stuff like that. And then just kind of, take the things that worked in that fight and continue to, implement those in the gym, get to use in that fight, and see if you can add some new tools to the game as you go. But I've been in this game, for so long. So it's really kind of just train as hard as I can, put the 100% belief in yourself.
When you're facing a guy like Cody Gibson, a taller, rangier guy, right, longer guy for the division, is there a common denominator among all of those guys that are like built like him? That's something that you have to be good at. If you're not, it's gonna be a long night, let's say.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I feel actually statistically in my career I've done really well against like those longer,
Mm.
lengthier guys. For some reason, I don't know is if I can get inside and like get in that pocket where the fight's dangerous, I tend to like do better in there, like against those taller guys. With leverage, I feel, especially if a taller guy is a wrestler, like it's harder to take me down. He has to get underneath me. Easier. I'm more compact, and I'm lower. You know what I mean, to the ground. So I just think, like, for me, from my fighting style, like it fits better against a guy like Cody Gibson, and that's a little bit longer. That maybe doesn't really use their length.
And like you mentioned the wrestling, you do have quite a few guillotines. I mean, you're very good at that. Is that something that you've always been able to snatch up, even early in your career, like even before, like let's say you stacked up all the submission wins?
Some body types, some things just fit and work better for you than other people, and that was just one of those chokes for me that, like, I would get a squeeze going and I would get very high level guys in that choke early on in my career. Like even when I was, white belt, blue belt, like I was hitting that choke against like real high level guys. Whereas like maybe I was really, but that choke was like my thing, and like I was hitting it, and like I was like, man, I gotta run with this. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna keep latching onto this, and like I go for it from everywhere. So like I have different angles and different strategies of how there's a bunch of different avenues that I could take to get that choke, that you would be surprised that it could come from that area, so I definitely always look to jump the gilly, as Dustin Poirier would say.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so I'm not going to be shy about doing it again, for sure.
It's an interesting matchup, man, against Cody Gibson. I don't even want to ask you like how you think you're gonna perform, because I know that you're gonna be looking for the finish, and this is a very important fight for you, man. Like, every fight is important. This one is extremely important, especially with all the circumstances.
Like for me, it's like it's essentially do or die, but without putting too much pressure on myself. Is like the reality of the situation. So I'm doing everything I can. Like I don't do anything but sports. I play hockey and like golf and stuff, but like I don't barely see my friends. You know what I mean? I barely do anything. I'm very disciplined with my craft, and this is the life I live. So like I'm just hoping all the hard work pays off in this fight, and I can keep the dream alive, because I honestly don't see any other thing that I love besides this right now, and that scares me, the future. So the only way keep that away is to get a win in this fight. So I'm gonna leave everything in that cage. Like leave my whole heart in there and prepare the.
One last thing, man, before I let you go. On this UFC Saudi Arabia card, right? There was a fighter that signed with the UFC and then got popped before his debut, and then went online and admitted that he took PEDs 3 months before signing with the UFC. What do you think of this scenario, man? Like the guys that are like taking PEDs and then getting popped before their debut, should they even be in the UFC? You think like there should be some kind of guideline to that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because level, as the UFC, and with these guys, like if they are taking some stuff and some stuff is still lingering in their system, it could, it could be one of those cases where something was lingering in the system and it really isn't even like a performance enhancer at that time anymore because he's not on it anymore, but it's still a guy that was willing to cheat, so
Yeah.
those guys are usually willing to continue to cheat if they were at some point. So it's kind of like karma, it's like you get what you deserve. And I guess he was using some stuff and it came up, and it's unfortunate for him because had an opportunity to make a debut. Maybe he gets a second chance if he can clean his act up. But it's kind of good to see that they're picking up on this stuff. You kind of want to make sure that the sport's still clean. Keeping dirty athletes out of the UFC. So it is nice to see that they're catching on to it still.
Yeah, for sure. What like in the gym, right? In the gyms around the world, your gym. Do people really care, like when they're training with people, if they're on PEDs or not? Is that something that people talk about?
I don't think it really comes up much anymore. I think most people know that like their dreams to get to the UFC, and we get tested a lot, and like you lose out on these opportunities to get bigger paydays by taking something that it's not guaranteed to make you win fights anyways. It could help you recover and stuff like that. And maybe if they were to say, hey, everybody could take it, it'd be a different story. But like in the gym, I feel like no one really even. But hey, I'm gonna train hard whether or not you're on something or not. Like I got to work my ass off and train as hard as I can. So it is what it is. I mean, even in sparring, it's not like we're like really trying to kill each other in there.
Yeah.
But when you fight someone, it's a whole different level where like this is like life or death. Like we're trying to hurt each other in there. So it's a different kind of who's on something or who isn't. It's just kind of like maybe discuss like that in the UFC is it still going on, and it shouldn't be, and this and that.
Yeah, it's a peculiar case right there, and I think it's gonna start happening much more. But it doesn't matter, man. July 20th, you're back in action. You and Cody Gibson. It's a really good stylistic matchup. I think you guys gonna stand and bag it out a little bit, so it's fun for the fans, man. Thank you, Brian, always for taking the time, and all the best in this fight and moving forward with your career.